folks. Beat those folks to it over there. For Lois and me, and I hope for many of you, these hours together at this time of the year are among our most treasured experiences. This is especially true for the anniversary children, and Lois is one because she was there at the beginning. She's still with us. And we want to express a gratitude that is really inexpressible for all of these magnificent arrangements. For this privilege, once a year, of getting the pulse of our society, the chance of seeing a substantial cross-section of what Mary called the beloved community. This is a very great privilege, a marvelous satisfaction. Thank you. Thank all concerned. And thank God. Lois would like to share this giving of thanks to you with me.
Good evening, everybody. And thanks a million for all your love that I can feel up here. And all the things that you have done by carrying the message of AA for all these years. This afternoon at the reception, I was taken unaware that I was going to have to say anything, and I told what I was going to repeat here and what I had expected I would say here. It's just a little anecdote. But some 17 years ago, I spoke at the dinner here, in a nearby hotel, and I said that it was 17 years that Bill had drank during our married life. And that then there had been 17 years of sobriety, so that the score was even. And now we had started on a brand new road. Now it's another 17 years. And I can't express my gratitude and wonder at particularly these last 17 years. And I thank you all so much.
Just as anonymity is the foundation of our tradition, so is the spiritual awakening, the spiritual experience, the foundation of recovery in AA, and progress in the life which has a new dimension. I would like to talk about the spiritual experience, and as a backdrop against which we may view it, I would like to tell you a succession of short stories The first one coming to mind is a recent one. It had to do with a Japanese delegation coming over, I expect, on the occasion of the Congress in Washington, who wished to visit the office and pose the great dilemma that was facing AAs and would-be AAs in Japan. And the dilemma was what to do about the God business. They pointed out that the steps say God as we understood him. And they had put a brand new, entirely original construction on that phrase. They said, we understand that we should believe in the God that the people believe in at AA General Headquarters, 305 East 45th Street, New York City. Nevertheless, though this has its humorous twist, they were posing a question very old. And theirs was exactly the dilemma that once I faced. I'm not going to detail my story at length. I'm going to touch on those spots that will best illustrate this theme of the awakening of spiritual experience. But you do remember how my sponsor, Ebby, came to me in Brooklyn, and how over the kitchen table he told me of his release from alcoholism through the ministry of the Oxford group, the people from whom we drew so much. And as he told the story, unfolded the need for honesty, the need for restitution, the need for giving of oneself without reckoning the returns, especially those of prestige and money. It was all fine up to this point. But then, when he said, I asked God to help me do these things, I found myself wincing. And he went away. His words had struck me deep. Not because they were so new, but because they were spoken across a kinship of suffering, one which I know he had endured, and one that I could see indeed that he was released from. And release was where? He wasn't on the waterway. He wasn't twisting up that spring that inevitably flows only to pitch us back into the drink again. No, he was released. And you could see that a good part of what had happened to him he attributed to the grace of God. Now, I had never been a militant atheist, but I had been raised in the scientific tradition, was so schooled. I had come to believe that the universe was a matter of time and space and particles that we had evolved somehow from this mysterious background, probably because a cosmic ray had bumped into the genes of some of the lower animals, let's say the apes and plenty before this, and this is set in process mutation that finally evolved human beings. This, in a way, was my religion, my faith in science. I could not deny necessarily the claims of religion. Who would be so arrogant as to know? But nevertheless, religion for me, this hard-bitten Vermonter, well, that was out of the question. Particularly this emotional evangelism. Now, Ebby, in a great and providential prudence, did not put any aggression on me. He merely said what his experience has been and what the result was. He admitted he was licked. He made a self-survey. He made restitution. He worked with other people. And he prayed to the God of his understanding, which I took to be the God of the Episcopal Church. Well, after he left, as you remember, I went on drinking. And then the identical dilemma that the Japanese are facing was on me. By this time, Dr. Stokworth, only months before, had told Lloyd that I suffered from a compulsion to destructive drinking with which my will, neither my will nor his resources, could cope with. That there was a physical component to this, and if it continued to be aggravated, this so-called allergy, I would go mad or worse. Now, I knew what this sentence was. And through another channel, Ebby had brought in the same thing. Via a friend of his who had been to the famous Dr. Carl Jung, who you remember, had said, "My arm has failed. It cannot help you. Your only chance, Roland," for such was the customer's name, "is a spiritual awakening." You remember that Roland said, "But I am a man of faith." And Jung said, "But this goes further. This goes deeper. This means a transforming experience that mysteriously, we know not how, expels the effect." So here was another God of my time, pronouncing a sentence upon me. And I knew I had no recourse besides in my case. So I was caught in a terrible bond. Here, the nature of my illness was revealed. And God knows my whole experience for several years had confirmed this knowledge. So, the bind increased, and my drinking increased. But always the face of my friend across that table. So at last, in desperation, and no hope, I'll assure you, I thought I'd better go up to the hospital and get my addled brain cleared up and see if I couldn't take another look. And so I did go up there. And I wasn't in too bad shape. And Dr. Stoker had put me to bed. And as the liquor wore off and the sedation was gone, the bind on me increased and increased. My God, I'm destined for more deterioration, insanity, and death, hell-bent. And now they seem to be saying to me, the Oxford groupers and Ebbie, only God can bail you out. And how can I believe in God? So the upshot was deeper and deeper and finally agonizing depression. And then my friend came, repeated his formula, went away, and I took one more tremendous nosedive and cried out in no hope at all. Just cried out. If there is a God, will he show himself? And you've heard me tell the story so many times. There was this great light. There was this tremendous, indescribable ecstasy. There was the exclamation by me. I'm a free man. So this is the God of preachers. Then the great peace settled on me. And I felt I was in a new world. Or certainly had a very different view of the old one. A universe in which all was somehow right. All was meaningful. That I belonged. That I had a place in. And then came the wonder. Why it was that I'd had this experience, but so few seemed to have it. Yes, I knew that drunks had got religion, and all through the centuries had sobered up. So then, in came my sponsor with a book in his hand of great moments to us of AA. And this is William James on varieties of religious experience. And I began to devour this book, and the tenor of it was that those granted these transforming gifts of faith were generally people who had reached some impasse in some controlling area of life so as to render them inoperative as human beings. They were the people who couldn't get over it or around it or under it. It was these experiences were set on a base of hopelessness. Now then, at dinner after dinner, I have come and recited this story. And I think I have been deeply amiss in not making it abundantly clear that however spectacular, however sweet, however unbelievable to many this experience of mine was, that it was in essence no different than that which any AA acquires. That he may acquire such a transforming experience by first deflating frustration, enough suffering to rub out all rationalization. The attendance upon AA as a higher power, if you like, and the putting of all theological considerations and arguments on the back of the soul. You and I have sat in meetings time after time. We have heard guys and gals in AA get up and recite what was indeed a miracle of transformation. And then they say to us, but gee, this is a wonderful fellowship. This is saving my life. This is saving my family. This is marvelous. But I'm awful sorry to say, folks, I ain't got the spiritual angle. Well, you and I looking at the newlywed, the newly born, we nudge ourselves one next to the other, and we whisper, holy smoke, he's just reeking with it. He just hasn't put a tag on it. I'm very mindful of this because early on there was an episode down in the old 24th Street Club. Must have been in year 2 or 3 of Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, maybe a little later. And we had one of these no spiritual angle boys who had been doing a great, great job in AA. Gee, everybody liked that kid. You know. And he'd get up and say, well, it's great, but I didn't get the spiritual angle. But one night, lo and behold, he got up and announced and said, I got the spiritual angle. I got the higher power. Now I know I'm getting it made. And then he went on to say, you know what my higher power is? He says it's that radiator over there. And when the steam comes in that radiator, the heat comes out and it warms up the place. But any time there's any steam in my radiator, nothing comes out of it but trouble. So this is my higher power. And this group is my higher power. And that was really my higher power all the time, because when I came along, most of you guys were sober and I was drunk. Sure enough. Well, 2 or 3 years later, I remember this same chap saying, you know, I've been reading a book, funny written by some psychiatrist, on the subject of cosmic consciousness. You know, as I read that book, somehow I realized that I'd got a belt of that stuff, and some of us rubbed off on it. Now, that was beginning as just about the lowest common denominator of the experience. And yet his experience was just as valid, just as transforming as mine. Now, I think that it would sort of help if we look over the spiritual experience situation among our speakers here, for example, Al and Mary. And finally, I would like to speak for Dr. Bob, as best I may, on that subject. Before launching on that assignment, I'd like to tell another story. back after the Saturday Post piece, I was approached by Dr. Foster Kennedy, one of the neurologists of world renown back in those days. Foster Kennedy had for a long time treated free a gal that thousands of us know. Her name is Marty. And as Marty will tell you, and as Dr. Kennedy will tell you, she was one hell of a mess and a most difficult alcoholic. Well, he saw her come to her first meeting at our house in Clinton Street, and saving one slip a few months later, she hasn't had a drink to this day. This so stirred Dr. Kennedy, he came to me and he said, "Look, Bill, could I ask you a favor? I noticed in that Saturday Post piece that a number of physicians who had apparently watched you folks for some time said very, very good things about AA. Now," said he, "I wish that you could get one or two of those fellows, or some of your other medical friends, perhaps, to come to the Academy of Medicine, where I will arrange hearings for them, and let it be heard from these doctors what they think about AA and why they think it works." Well, this was great news at this early time. And gee, could you imagine a doctor not being glad to go to the Academy on the invitation of the great Foster Kennedy? I couldn't. So I began to canvass these dear medical friends of ours, and not one of them would go near the place. Not one. And I said, "Gee, folks, you went into the Saturday Post. You sure stuck your necks out that time. Feature article. You broadcast it to the world, you're right behind it. Why won't you go up to the Academy and talk?" Well, briefly summarized, the consensus of their answer was this. In effect, they said, "Look, Bill, UAAs have got quite a package composed of attitude, principles, action. You have a kind of a crude catharsis. In religion, you might call it a confession. You know, a kind of an analysis. You take a survey of your so-called character defects. Then you have a program of trying to get down these barriers that you put up between yourself and other people, particularly those you have damaged. You make restitution. This is great. Then you have a great new compelling interest in life. This kind of giving of yours that demands no reward. Well, I could extend this list still further, but that was the idea. But they said this is the thing that to us is inexplicable. God knows of all people, having worked with alcohol, we know the gravity of this obsession to destructive drinking. And if it weren't for the fact that drinking is socially acceptable, it would be rated among the world's number one is alcoholism. This self-destruction by alcohol against the victim's will, his interest. Now then, making due allowance for all the forces that we can see at work, we still can't account for the results you're getting. What you people accomplish obsession to drink in matters of days, weeks, or even months. The change in direction is something that should have, by any calculation, taken you years, not weeks, days, or months. Therefore, we see and deeply feel that in this society there is an X-factor. Some force is operated that we cannot describe. We can only postulate its presence. It surely is there. We can't explain it. So who would we be to go to the Academy of Medicine to explain the inexplicable? We suppose in your language that would be to explain God. Well, lots of other people have made similar observations. Of course, all of us realize sooner or later along our course that this is something more than just a society of people with a good work and the blood brotherhood and the kinship of suffering. It's more than that. Every speaker has brought this up and dreamt it. And you'll notice that their transforming experience was so often contingent upon the barest beginning. So now, let's see if I can equate some of these other experiences with my own. Here comes Al. Al kind of comes in, I would gather from what he told me, sort of swinging on this God bit. But at any rate, he was going to have a look. And so he did. Al had much more than a look. He plunged in. Now it must be that Al found here much more than a society of nice and sometimes not so nice people, an understanding crowd with a mission in life. Otherwise, why would he have gone to 22 meetings? Why, still taking his college course, was he going to 10 a week? Was there not, and will he not tell you, of course he will, that here was a magnet. One pole marked God might repel him a little, but the other pole marked love drew him on. And so he began to grow in spiritual stature without solving the theological riddle of which came first, the hen or the egg. And was his experience not just as valid as mine, less spectacular? You know, the good book has that phrase, by their fruit ye shall know them. You know, speaking of Al, reminds you of young folks. The other day, I looked out the office door, and I said, holy smoke, what's that one doing in here? And there was a gay little doll with a mini skirt about so long, and I guess she had love beads on, and she came, you know, pirouetting down the hall. I said, gee, what's this? Oh, somebody said, she's from the young people's group out in L.A. Boy, I said get her in there quick. I really didn't know what to expect. I've been trying so hard to understand the youth, you know. Yeah, maybe here will be a great chance. So, in she came, and she sat herself down, and this young lady was sure full of joy. She said, you know, Bill, that young people's group is just going great guns. She says, I'm the oldest member, and I'm 23. And then she handed me out a line of AA. Well, it could make you cry for joy. It could make you know that if the young generation is like that doll and ass, the future of AA is perfectly safe. Now, all this time, it never occurred to me to ask the gal what she thought about God, or the spiritual end, or any of the old questions. Nor did I try to snore with my exalted spiritual experience. This time it was the other way around. I was taking some lessons for a change. And so it has been in listening to Al and this gal. And now comes Mary. Gee, there was a hard note. Oh, boy. Well, there were a lot of things Mary didn't say about herself. And what I'm going to say, I don't think she'll take as praise. She will only say that these are the gifts of AA's grace to her. But since Mary came in, as a lawyer still having a practice in Chappaqua, they practice dealing extensively with families in trouble, wives and husbands in trouble, kids in trouble. I keep hearing about the length to which Mary will go, far and beyond her legal responsibility, to bring peace and love into these situations. She's tired in this respect in practicing the 12 steps in all her affairs. And this is amazing. Mary has done a great stint as a 12 steps. She came down when our magazine was in trouble some years. And she worked on that for a year or two. And then she became a trustee. She says rather wryly, however, that this didn't seem to impress her group at all. So, pull her away to question the truth of Mary's spiritual awakening. You know, I'm constantly surrounded by people whose spiritual awakening might be questioned on a strictly theological basis. But one, however, so effective that they, well, it just speaks loudly for itself. Now, my mind goes back to Dr. Bach, you remember, I had gallivanted around New York. I'd forgotten that book by Jimmy James, said there were lots of kinds of religious experiences. I got in the habit of thinking there was only one kind, and that was this bright light job I had. I figured if you put it in deep into these drunks that, you know, they were hopeless, you'd fulfill one of James' conditions, the base being hopelessness. They'd hit bottom, and boom, perhaps even ignited by me, they would go right up in a bright light. Nothing of the sort happened. For 6 months, drunks had run screaming away from it. Well, sticking around a little while couldn't take it, and they got sued. So, by the time I got to Akron on this business trip, I was getting a little deflated, as I should have been. And I was further deflated and alarmed when my first temptation to drink came. Since the experience. Prior to the experience, my mind was just full of booze, where it was, where the bottles were in the house. If I wasn't too drunk, how full they were. And I had found that in the whole 6 months of my experience, after it, I had never even looked on the shelf to see whether there was a bottle there in the house. I had never thought of it. It was lifted bodily out of me. And that's some miracle, and that's some gift in my case. Well, so I was coming to the end of my preaching. And there is a person in this room who had a good deal to do with bringing that about. I wish time permitted me to say more in thanks to a friend, but this is a friend of the very early day of AA. And her understanding, her friendship with Dr. Bob, resulted in our meeting, and her influence on us subsequently was enduring. The value beyond price. I see our old friend Henrietta sitting over here. Won't you stand up, Henrietta? So Henrietta brought me up to her house, and soon Dr. Bob and Ann were standing in the door, and she siphoned Ann off into the living room, put Bob and me in the little library, and he wasn't going to stay for a little while, and we talked for hours. Now this time, I had got down to my right side. This time, I discovered a man of faith in spite of his faith. I discovered a man who had more actual enlightenment, who prayed, who did all sorts of things that I didn't do much of, my experience notwithstanding. Here was a man of faith. Here was a man who had tried everything he knew, but he was still drunk. Now you notice in all the other cases I've cited, nobody had any faith at all. And most of us got over drinking very quickly, or even the temptation to drink. And yet here was Dr. Bob, lots of faith, couldn't stop drinking. Well, I thought I wouldn't give this guy any lessons in faith, so I told him, quoting Dr. Silkworth, what an alcoholic is. And this was probably what made the difference. I just looked in the old AA book, the one Mary never got around to reading, And Dr. Bob, as you know, has the first story in the story section. And when the preliminaries were done, he gets down to remembering my visit. And he said, June 10th, 1935, was my last drink. As I write, nearly 6 years have passed. The question which might naturally come into your mind would be, what did Bill do or say that was different from what others had done and said? Now, it must be remembered that I had read a great deal and talked to everybody who knew or thought they knew anything about the subject of alcoholism. But this was a man who had experienced many years of frightful drinking, who had had nearly all drunkards' experiences known to man, but who had been cured by the very means I had been trying to employ. That is to say, the spiritual folk. He gave me information about the subject of alcoholism, which was undoubtedly helpful. Now, in italics, the old boy writes it here. Far more important was the fact that he was the first living human being with whom I had ever talked who knew what he was talking about in regard to alcoholism from actual experience. In other words, he talked my language. Now, when Bob hit bottom, his faith took hold, and he had an experience. But this was of the gradual, imperceptible kind. At another point in this story of his, he remarked that it was 2.5 years after he sobered up before he ceased to want a drink. It was slow coming. And, said he, the only insurance I could take out was trying to help other alcoholics of losing my life in their troubles instead of my own. Now we all know, and it should never be forgotten, that what Dr. Bob and that dear nun, Sister Ignatius, brought about in action between 1940 and 1950, in which they ministered to the needs of 5,000 alcoholics, a very large proportion of whom got well. That Dr. Bob did this, although in his case it was a definite menace to his business. AA is no liability to the average MD, but believe me, it is to a surgeon, and that's what Bob wants. So this kept them on the edge of being broke for years, because everybody, when Bob was proposed with surgery, said, gee, we're awful glad that tie is dry, but when 9 o'clock in the morning strikes and he puts the knife on me, he just might be drunk. Moreover, he charged nothing for his medical work with these 5,000 customers. Now then, it took something more than the desire to do good work. For a man to go to this place, it took something more in a spiritual sense to activate a person for 10 years up to the time of his death in such fashion. This we know. And isn't it great that his awakening was of the slow variety, the imperceptible variety, and that it was awful hard, and that as a result, he and Ignatia lit 5,000 candles in the city of Athens, enough to fill this room twice over in 10 years. And how many descendants must there now be from those who made the grade? A good 60%. They can be found in all parts of the world and will multiply from generation unto generation. So, the Japanese, who were unavoidably sidetracked in getting over to the office, are people I still like to see, to give them the assurance that they need not fear evangelism here. They can believe in the God of their understanding. Whether God is he, she, or it, or cosmic force, or great humanity, the only requirement really for beginning the opening of this fourth dimension of experience is the willingness to admit utter defeat, returning to a higher power. The admission is certainly I am not God. When these things are done in the climate of our beloved fellowship, AA becomes possible to practically any alcoholic. And this is the news that I think we have failed to broadcast. When you stop to think about it, there are probably thousands upon tens of thousands of alcoholics in the world who could get well tonight and who are kept away by the impression that we are some sort of a cult, that theological demands will be made upon us, that we are do-gooders, that they can't be connected with anything where anybody talks about God. As you see on the record, this is not so. Cannot we better carry this message to professionals in the field? And I hear them constantly say, from where they sit, well, of course, AA is just great. Biggest thing yet come along. But isn't it too bad that none but the religiously skeptical can benefit by it? Well, what about that guy who pointed out the radiator? This doesn't sound like a lot of religious acceptability, does it? Or this young squirt over here who came charging. Or this hard-nosed dame. Or me, this rock-ribbed Vermont. Nothing was the only one in the whole bunch who had any faith, who could be said on that basis to be religiously acceptable. So, as we go home, let us ponder new and better means of carrying a message to all who suffer alcoholism. Let us not erect barriers of arrogance, spiritual arrogance being the worst of all. Let us throw open wide doors of AA. As Mary said, how permissive it really is after you get in. But the people on the outside don't take it. So, and candles will be passed on and on, we think, from hand to hand, and from one generation to the next. For so long as God may need our beloved community. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. We're ready to get our meeting underway, and I would like to get started in the usual way by observing a moment of silence. Thank you. Now I'll ask Cora Louise Belford to come forward and lead us in the Serenity Prayer.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cora Louise Belford, and a very grateful alcoholic. Grateful for this weekend and to all of you for being here. And would you join me in saying the Serenity Prayer? Shall we all stand? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
We have a few announcements, as usual, and I'd like to make those at this time. I'd like to remind all of you that there will be no picture taking at these sessions, but that panoramic photograph will be available for purchase at the Fontainebleau and also in the lobby of Convention Hall out here. Also, please, no taping of meetings. All the meetings here and all of those at the hotel, with the exception of the workshop, have been taped, and these tapes are available at the Fontainebleau and here at Convention Hall. The orders can be placed. As you know, free bus service is available to and from Convention Hall here from the major hotels. Schedules are available at the information booth in the Fontainebleau, and your convention badge is your admission ticket. There are still souvenir programs and pens available at the Fontainebleau, and best cartoons from the Grapevine, favorite editorials from the Al-Anon Forum. Both of these are also available at the headquarters hotel and here at Convention Hall. I've been asked to request Bill Cottrell from Hamilton, Ontario, to please contact Hector at the Hotel Waldman. I believe that I was in error last night when I announced that the reception for the host committee would be from 1 to 3 this afternoon. That reception will be from 3 to 5. I'm sorry for having given you the wrong information. Reception for the host committee at the Fontainebleau from 3 to 5 this afternoon. Just like to remind you that there is a lost and found department at the information booth at the Fontainebleau, and also a message center there. I'm told that there are many messages on the message board there which have not been picked up, so you might just want to check that out. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you our chairman for this meeting, Dr. Jack.
Folks, we have a tremendous thrill. Our prayers have been answered. Bill is here and will be coming right on.
Dear folks, there's always something new in one's AA life. And what do you think it is with me this morning? It is that I am absolutely speechless. That is almost absolutely speechless. As I look out across this crowd, there floats back to me a mighty assurance. And this is a mighty assurance for AA's future. That indeed it will go on for so long as God wants us. The other thing I would like to set on the record is my tremendous gratitude at being able to be with you in this finest hour of our closing meeting. So I can only say, may God bless and keep you and Alcoholics Anonymous forever.